My daughter-in-law turned my son against me. For 13 years, she kept my grandchildren away. Then I sold my company for $15 million. The very next day, she showed up at my new mansion, uninvited with a smirk on her face, and said, "We need to move in immediately. The twins will love the space. You're old anyway. What do you need a big house for?" I looked her dead in the eye, and when I finally spoke, the words that came out of my mouth made her scream non-stop. "I'll tell you everything. First, let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout-out in our next video." Today's special shout-out goes to Doris Brown from Minnesota. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. My name is Margaret Thompson, and at 62 years old, I've learned that some people mistake kindness for weakness until it's too late to fix their mistake. 13 years. That's how long my daughter-in-law Brenda had been playing gatekeeper to my son Michael and my twin grandchildren Emma and Jake. 13 years since she convinced Michael that his mother was too old-fashioned, too interfering, too much of everything that didn't fit her picture-perfect family. The morning everything changed started with me sitting in my small apartment, drinking instant coffee from a chipped mug, reading the legal papers that would transform my life forever. My tiny home-based catering business had somehow caught the attention of a major food corporation. They wanted to buy my secret sauce recipes and my client list for an amount that made me read the contract 3 times. $15 million. For something I'd started in my kitchen after my husband died, using his grandmother's old recipes and a whole lot of determination. $15 million for late nights preparing meals for office parties and wedding receptions, for building relationships one satisfied customer at a time. But this money wasn't just numbers on paper. It was freedom. Freedom to stop worrying about rent. Freedom to stop apologizing for existing. And most importantly, freedom to show my grandchildren what their grandmother was really made of. The sale went through on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, I was standing in the lobby of the most exclusive real estate office in town, telling them I needed a house big enough for a family I hoped to reunite. "Something with character," I told the agent, a young woman who kept glancing at my simple clothes and second-hand purse. "Something that says, 'Welcome home,' to children who've never been allowed to visit." The house they showed me was perfect. A beautiful Victorian mansion with wraparound porches, a huge kitchen for family dinners, and bedrooms that practically begged for grandchildren's laughter. I bought it that same day, paying cash like I was buying groceries. 2 weeks later, I was unpacking boxes in my new home when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a sight that made my heart skip. Brenda stood on my porch, but this wasn't the confident woman who'd spent years treating me like an inconvenience. Her designer clothes looked less polished, her smile seemed forced, and there was something desperate in her eyes that hadn't been there before. I opened the door slowly, taking my time to let her see the marble entryway, the crystal chandelier, the obvious signs of wealth she'd never associated with poor old Margaret. "Brenda," I said pleasantly. "What a surprise. Please come in." She walked through my new home like she was calculating the value of every piece of furniture, every painting, every sign that her former victim had somehow become someone she needed to reconsider. "Margaret," she said, trying to sound casual, "I heard about your business success. Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied, leading her to my new living room with its comfortable sofas and family photos I'd been unable to display for years. "Would you like some tea? I have a lovely view of the garden from the sunroom." As we sat down, I could see her struggling to adjust her approach. This wasn't the struggling widow she'd grown used to dismissing. "I'll get straight to the point," Brenda said, putting on her brightest smile. "Michael and I have been talking, and we think it's time to heal old wounds. The twins are 15 now, and they should know their grandmother." I nearly choked on my tea. Should know their grandmother. Brenda, they're 15 years old. I've missed birthdays, Christmas mornings, first days of school, soccer games, piano recitals. I've missed everything. "That's in the past," she said quickly. "What matters is moving forward. And frankly, Michael's architectural firm is going through a rough patch. We could really use your help getting back on our feet." There it was. The real reason for her sudden change of heart. Not love, not family reconciliation, but money. My money. What kind of help are you thinking about? Asked, keeping my voice neutral. Well, she said, her confidence growing as she mistook my calm for agreement. We thought you might like to invest in Michael's business. And maybe help with the twins' college funds. Private school is so expensive these days. I set down my teacup and looked at this woman who had stolen 13 years of my grandchildren's lives and now wanted to profit from their return. And where exactly do you see me fitting into this happy family reunion? Asked. Brenda's smile became even brighter, more artificial. We have a beautiful guest cottage behind our main house. You could live there, help with expenses, and spend time with Emma and Jake. It would be perfect. The guest cottage. Not the main house where family belonged, but a separate building where I could be useful without being inconvenient. That's very generous of you, Brenda, I said carefully. But I've grown rather attached to this place. All this space, all these bedrooms that are just waiting for visitors. I could see the wheels turning in her mind as she processed what I wasn't saying directly. Of course, the twins could visit you here sometimes, she said quickly. Though with school and activities, they're incredibly busy. You understand how it is with teenagers. Actually, I don't understand, I replied. I missed their entire childhood because someone decided I wasn't good enough to be their grandmother. But Brenda, things have changed now, haven't they? She shifted uncomfortably in her chair, finally beginning to realize that this conversation wasn't going the way she'd planned. What do you mean by that? She asked, her voice losing some of its artificial sweetness. I stood up and walked to my mantelpiece, where I'd placed a photo of Emma and Jake that I'd printed from their school's website. I mean that for 13 years you had all the power in this relationship. You controlled access to my son. You controlled whether I could see my grandchildren. You controlled the narrative about who I was and why I wasn't worth knowing. I turned back to face her. But power shifts, doesn't it? And now I have something you need. Brenda's mask was beginning to slip. I don't know what you're implying, Margaret. We genuinely want you to be part of the family again. Do you? Or do you want my bank account to be part of your family's financial recovery? Ask directly. Because there's a difference between wanting a relationship and wanting a resource. She stood up abruptly, clearly not used to being challenged so directly. That's not fair. We're offering you a chance to know your grandchildren. You're offering me a chance to pay for the privilege of knowing my grandchildren, I corrected. After 13 years of denying me that right for free. The silence stretched between us as Brenda realized her carefully planned approach was falling apart. Look, she said finally, dropping the pretense. Michael's business is in trouble. We're behind on the mortgage. The twins' school fees are due. We need help and you have money now. Isn't family supposed to help each other? Family, I repeated slowly. Yes, family is supposed to help each other. Family is supposed to share birthdays and holidays. Family is supposed to support each other through good times and bad. But for 13 years, Brenda, you made sure I wasn't family. I was just Michael's inconvenient mother who needed to be managed and avoided. I walked back to my chair and sat down, maintaining eye contact the entire time. So here's what I think happened. You married my son and decided his family was too ordinary for your ambitions. You slowly convinced him that I was holding him back, that my modest lifestyle was embarrassing, that his children would be better off without their grandmother's influence. And it worked beautifully until your own lifestyle became too expensive to maintain. Brenda's face flushed red. That's not how it happened. Isn't it? Then tell me, Brenda, what was your version of keeping my grandchildren away from me for over a decade? I protected them, she said defensively. You were always criticizing my parenting, always trying to undermine my authority. By sending birthday cards. By wanting to attend school plays. By asking to spend Christmas morning with my grandchildren. She was quiet, and I could see her scrambling for justification. You have to understand, Margaret. I was young when I married Michael. I felt like you were judging everything I did. It seemed easier to just create some distance. Easier for who? Yes. Because it wasn't easier for Emma and Jake to grow up without knowing their grandmother. It wasn't easier for Michael to lose his relationship with his mother. And it certainly wasn't easier for me. Brenda sat back down, looking smaller than when she'd arrived. I know I made mistakes, she admitted quietly. But I'm trying to fix them now. Are you? Or are you trying to use my love for my grandchildren to solve your financial problems? Ask directly. Because there's a big difference between making amends and making a transaction. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her realizing that her usual manipulation tactics weren't working on someone who no longer needed anything from her. What do you want from me, Margaret? She asked finally. I want the truth, I said simply. I want you to admit that you kept my grandchildren from me not to protect them, but to control the situation. I want you to acknowledge that my son deserves to have his mother in his life. And I want Emma and Jake to have the chance to decide for themselves whether they want a relationship with their grandmother. Brenda looked around my beautiful living room, calculating her options. And if I do that, if I admit I was wrong, what then? Then we start over, I said. But this time we do it honestly. No more lies about why grandma isn't around. No more excuses about being too busy for family visits. And definitely no more treating me like a bank account with grandmotherly feelings. The next few weeks were a delicate dance of rebuilding relationships that had been broken by years of manipulation and pride. Michael came to visit me alone first, walking through my new house with the wonder of a child seeing magic for the first time. Mom, he said softly, standing in the kitchen where I'd already started planning family dinners. I'm so sorry. I let her convince me that staying away was better for everyone. I believed her when she said you disapproved of our choices. I never disapproved of you, sweetheart, I replied, hugging my son for the first time in years. I was worried about some of the decisions you were making, but I never stopped loving you. She said you thought she wasn't good enough for me, Michael continued, his voice filled with regret. She said you were trying to break us up. I was concerned about how isolated you'd become, I admitted. But Michael, I wanted you to be happy. If Brenda made you happy, I was prepared to support that. What I wasn't prepared for was losing my son and grandchildren in the process. He sat down heavily at my kitchen table, looking older than his 38 years. I've made such a mess of everything, Mom. The business is failing. Brenda spends money we don't have. And the twins. They ask about you sometimes. They wonder why they don't have a grandmother like their friends do. They can have a grandmother, I said gently. But only if they want one. I won't force my way into their lives the way Brenda forced me out. Michael looked up at me with eyes that reminded me of the little boy who used to help me bake cookies. Will you meet them? Will you give us another chance? Before I could answer, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw two teenagers standing on my porch, holding flowers and looking nervous. Emma and Jake, 15 years old and beautiful, with Michael's dark hair and expressions that mixed curiosity with caution. I opened the door slowly, drinking in the sight of these grandchildren I'd watched grow up only through stolen glimpses on social media. Grandma Margaret, Emma asked uncertainly. We're Emma and Jake. We brought you flowers. My heart felt like it might burst. Hello, my darlings, I said softly. Would you like to come in? I've been waiting to meet you for a very long time. Jake stepped forward, looking exactly like Michael had at 15. Mom told us we couldn't visit you because you were always busy with work. But Dad said that wasn't true. The honesty in his voice was both heartbreaking and hopeful. These children deserved the truth, even if it was complicated. Your parents and I had some disagreements about family time, I said carefully, leading them into my living room. But what matters now is that you're here, and I get to finally meet the two most important people in the world to me. Emma looked around the room with wide eyes. This house is amazing. It's like something from a fairy tale. Thank you, sweetheart. I chose it because it's big enough for family gatherings. I was hoping that someday you and Jake might want to spend some time here with me. Jake flopped down on my sofa with typical teenage confidence. Could we really? Mom always said your apartment was too small for visitors. Over the next hour, I learned about my grandchildren's lives, their interests, their dreams. Emma loved art and wanted to be a designer. Jake played basketball and was learning to cook. They were bright, funny, kind children who'd grown up believing their grandmother simply didn't have time for them. Grandma Margaret, Emma said as they prepared to leave, would it be okay if we came back next weekend? Maybe you could show us how to make those cookies Dad talks about sometimes. I would love nothing more, I replied, walking them to the door. And Emma, Jake, you're welcome here anytime. This is your family's house too. After they left, I sat in my beautiful living room and cried. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief and gratitude. My grandchildren were wonderful, well-adjusted young people despite the complicated family dynamics they'd grown up with. They were curious about me, eager to build a relationship, and refreshingly honest about the confusing messages they'd received about why their grandmother hadn't been part of their lives. The real work of rebuilding our family was just beginning, but for the first time in 13 years, I felt hopeful about the future. Brenda's reaction to the twins' enthusiasm about visiting me was predictably complicated. She called me the next day, her voice tight with barely controlled anxiety. Margaret, I need you to be careful about what you tell Emma and Jake about the past. They're at an impressionable age, and I don't want them to be confused about family dynamics. What exactly are you worried about, Brenda? I asked calmly. I'm worried that you'll try to turn them against me the way you think I turned Michael against you. The irony of her statement was almost amusing. I have no intention of saying anything negative about you to your children. But I also won't lie to them if they ask direct questions about why we haven't had a relationship until now. They're 15, Margaret. They don't need to know about adult conflicts. They're 15, Brenda. They're old enough to notice when the official story doesn't match reality. And they're smart enough to figure out the truth eventually whether we tell them or not. There was a long pause before she spoke again. What do you want from me? I want you to stop being afraid that there's not enough love to go around, I said gently. Emma and Jake can love both of us. They can have a relationship with their grandmother without loving their mother any less. But that only works if you stop treating my love for them as competition. The next few months fell into a wonderful new rhythm. Emma and Jake visited me every weekend, sometimes alone, sometimes with Michael. We cooked together, worked on art projects, talked about their dreams for the future. I learned that Emma had inherited her grandfather's artistic talent, and Jake had his father's head for business. They were remarkable children, and every moment with them felt like a gift I'd been waiting 13 years to unwrap. Brenda gradually relaxed as she realized I wasn't trying to steal her children's affection, just add to it. She even joined us for a few family dinners, though the conversation was still sometimes awkward. The real test came when Michael's business finally collapsed completely. He came to me in tears, admitting that he was facing bankruptcy and didn't know how he'd support his family. I can't ask you for money, Mom, he said, sitting in my kitchen where we'd had so many important conversations. I know you think I've made terrible financial decisions. You have made terrible financial decisions, I agreed. But Michael, you're my son. Your children are my grandchildren. Of course I'm going to help. But what about Brenda? I know you two are still working things out. Brenda is your wife and the mother of my grandchildren. That makes her family too, even if we're still learning how to be family together. I helped Michael restart his business, but this time with proper financial planning and realistic expectations. I also insisted that Brenda take a financial management course, not as punishment, but as a way to ensure our family never faced this crisis again. I want Emma and Jake to see their parents as partners working together, I explained to her. Not as a mother cleaning up after a father who can't handle money. To her credit, Brenda took the course seriously and discovered she actually had a talent for budgeting and planning. I wish someone had taught me this stuff when I was younger, she admitted during one of our increasingly comfortable conversations. One evening, as we were all having dinner together in my dining room, Emma looked around the table with a thoughtful expression. "Grandma Margaret," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Always, sweetheart." "Were you very lonely all those years when you couldn't see us?" The question caught me off guard with its simple directness. Michael and Brenda both froze, waiting to see how I'd handle their daughter's innocent inquiry. "Yes," I said honestly. "I was very lonely. I missed you and Jake every single day. But I never stopped loving you or hoping that someday we'd be sitting around a table just like this." "I'm sorry we didn't know," Jake said quietly. "We would have wanted to see you if we'd understood." "You have nothing to apologize for," I assured him. "You were children. Adults made decisions that affected your life, and that wasn't your responsibility." Brenda spoke up unexpectedly. "It was my responsibility," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Emma, Jake, your grandmother is right. The grown-ups made some mistakes, and you missed out on knowing your grandmother because of choices I made. I'm sorry about that." It was the closest thing to a full apology I'd ever received from her, and I could see how much courage it took for her to say it in front of her children. "The important thing," I said gently, "is that we're all here now. We can't change the past, but we can make sure the future is different." Emma reached across the table to hold my hand. "Will you teach me to paint like Grandpa did? Dad told us you still have some of his art supplies." "I would love to teach you to paint," I replied, squeezing her small hand. "And Jake, if you're interested, I could use some help managing my investments. You seem to have inherited the family head for numbers." These children who'd grown up without me were choosing to include me in their future, and it felt like the most precious gift imaginable. As the months passed, our fractured family slowly healed into something stronger than it had ever been before. Michael's business began thriving under careful management. Brenda discovered talents she didn't know she had and started feeling more confident about her role in the family. Emma and Jake flourished with the additional love and support of a grandmother who celebrated their uniqueness. But the most important change was in how we all learned to communicate. Instead of avoiding difficult conversations, we started having them with honesty and kindness. One afternoon, as I was teaching Emma to paint in my sunroom, she asked me another one of her wonderfully direct questions. "Grandma, do you forgive Mom for keeping us apart all those years?" I considered her question carefully, mixing colors on the palette while I thought about my answer. "Forgiveness is complicated, sweetheart. I understand that your mom was young and scared when she made those choices. I don't think she meant to hurt anyone. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending that what happened was okay. It means choosing to build something better going forward." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. I'm glad we're building something better now." The real celebration came on Emma and Jake's 16th birthday. For the first time in 13 years, I was included in planning their party. We held it at my house, with a big backyard perfect for their friends and the kitchen large enough for baking their favorite cake together. As I watched my grandchildren laughing with their friends, opening presents, and including me naturally in their celebration, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge or proving a point. This was simply about love finally finding its way back to where it belonged. Brenda found me in the kitchen as I was cleaning up after the party. "Margaret," she said quietly, "I need to say something to you." I turned to face her, surprised by the serious tone in her voice. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for not making me pay forever for the mistakes I made when I was younger. Thank you for helping Michael save his business. Thank you for loving my children even when I made it impossible. And thank you for showing me that family isn't about competition. It's about making the circle bigger, not smaller." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was genuine, and it acknowledged the reality of what had happened without making excuses. "Brenda," I replied, "we all make mistakes when we're young and scared. The important thing is learning from them and doing better. You're a good mother, and you raised wonderful children. I'm grateful that you're letting me be part of their lives now." She hugged me then, for the first time since she'd married my son, and it felt like the final piece of our family puzzle clicking into place. We weren't perfect, but we were whole again. 2 years later, I stood in my kitchen preparing Sunday dinner for a house full of family. Emma was setting the table while telling me about her acceptance to art school. Jake was helping his father fix a leaky faucet while discussing his plans for studying business. Brenda was in the garden cutting flowers for centerpieces, something she'd discovered she enjoyed during our weekly family dinners. The noise, the chaos, the beautiful messiness of family life filled every room of my house. Michael came up behind me as I stirred gravy, putting his arm around my shoulders. "Mom," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "What's that, sweetheart?" "I was wrong to let Brenda convince me to stay away from you all those years. I was wrong to choose keeping peace over doing what was right. And I was wrong to let my children miss out on having you in their lives." I turned to face my son, this good man who'd lost his way for a while but found his courage again. "Michael, we all made choices we regret. The important thing is that we found our way back to each other. But I need you to know," he continued, "that if I had to choose between my wife and my mother again, I'd make a different choice. I'd find a way to keep both relationships healthy instead of sacrificing one for the other." It was the apology I'd been waiting 13 years to hear, not because I needed him to grovel, but because I needed to know he understood the cost of the choices he'd made. "I love you, Mom," he said simply. "And I'm proud to be your son." "I love you too," I replied. "And I'm proud of the man you've become, especially in how you've learned from your mistakes." As we all sat around my dining room table that evening, sharing food and stories and laughter, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. The money from selling my business had bought me this house, but it hadn't bought me this family. The family had been rebuilt through patience, honesty, forgiveness, and the willingness to start over when starting over was hard. Emma and Jake were thriving young adults who knew they were loved unconditionally. Michael had learned to balance his roles as husband and son. Brenda had discovered that sharing love didn't diminish it. "Grandma Margaret," Jake said as we were finishing dessert, "will you tell us again about how you started your catering business with just Grandpa's recipes and determination?" I smiled at my grandson, this confident young man who wanted to start his own business someday. "I started it because I needed to survive," I said. "But I kept going because I discovered I was good at bringing people together around food. Food has a way of making everything better, don't you think?" Emma laughed. "Is that why you always have cookies ready when we come over?" "Exactly," I replied. "Cookies solve most problems, and when they don't, cake usually does the job." The real success of our family reunion wasn't the money or the house or even the restored relationships. It was the way Emma and Jake had learned to navigate family complexities with grace and honesty. They loved their mother without excusing her past mistakes. They appreciated their father's efforts to make amends. They embraced their grandmother without holding grudges about missed years. They were becoming the kind of adults who would handle their own family challenges with wisdom and kindness. That was the legacy I was most proud of leaving them. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat in my living room looking at the photos that now covered every surface. Birthday parties I'd finally been invited to. Holiday mornings I'd been included in. Graduation ceremonies where I sat in the front row cheering for my grandchildren. School plays where Emma had looked for my face in the audience. Basketball games where I'd embarrassed Jake by cheering too loudly. All the moments I'd missed for 13 years were now being replaced by new memories we were creating together. The doorbell rang, and I was surprised to find Emma standing on my porch with an overnight bag. "Hi, Grandma. Mom said I could stay the night if it's okay with you. I wanted to work on my art portfolio, and your sunroom has the best light." "Of course, sweetheart. You're always welcome here." As Emma settled into the guest room that had been waiting for her for 3 years, I marveled at how natural it felt to have my granddaughter in my house. This was what I'd imagined when I bought this place. Not empty rooms waiting to be filled, but family members coming and going as naturally as breathing. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed like I'd dreamed of doing when she was small, she asked me one more of her thoughtful questions. "Grandma, do you ever wish things had happened differently? That we'd known you all along?" I sat on the edge of her bed, brushing her hair away from her face like I'd imagined doing 1,000 times. "Sometimes," I said honestly. "I wish I could have been there for your first steps and first words. I wish I could have kissed your scraped knees and celebrated your achievements from the beginning." "But," she prompted, sensing there was more. "But I think maybe we appreciate each other more because of what we went through," I continued. "Maybe you value having a grandmother because you know what it's like not to have one. Maybe I treasure every moment with you and Jake because I know how precious these moments are." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this idea. "So you think the sad parts made the happy parts better?" "I think the sad parts made us stronger and more grateful for the happy parts," I replied. "And sweetheart, all the happy parts are still ahead of us." She hugged me tightly. "I love you, Grandma Margaret. I love you too, my darling girl. Sweet dreams." The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Emma moving around in the kitchen. I found her making pancakes, using a recipe I'd taught her just last weekend. "Good morning, Grandma. I wanted to surprise you with breakfast." We ate together on the sunroom while she showed me her latest paintings. She'd captured our family in watercolor, all of us sitting around my dining room table, smiling and reaching for each other across the food. "This is beautiful, Emma. You've really captured something special here." "It's us," she said simply. "It's our family the way it's supposed to be." As I drove Emma home later that morning, I realized that this was what victory actually looked like. Not dramatic confrontations or devastating comebacks, but quiet Sunday mornings making pancakes with your granddaughter. Not revenge or vindication, but the simple joy of being included in the daily rhythms of family life. Brenda had tried to erase me from my family's story, but love had found a way to write me back in. And the story we were writing now was better than anything I could have imagined during those 13 lonely years. When I dropped Emma off at home, Brenda came out to greet us. "How was your sleepover?" she asked her daughter with genuine interest. "Perfect," Emma replied. "Grandma taught me a new painting technique, and we made pancakes together. Oh, and I finished my college application essay." "That's wonderful, honey. What did you write about?" "I wrote about second chances," Emma said, looking meaningfully at both of us. "About how families can heal when people are brave enough to admit their mistakes and kind enough to forgive them." Brenda and I exchanged a look of shared understanding. Our children were wise beyond their years, shaped by adversity into thoughtful, compassionate young adults. "Margaret," Brenda said as Emma went inside, "I never properly thanked you for how you handled everything. A lot of people would have tried to turn the kids against me after what I did. You could have made me pay for keeping them from you. Brenda, making you pay wouldn't have brought back the years we lost. And it wouldn't have helped Emma and Jake, which is all I really cared about. Still," she insisted, "I want you to know that I see the grace you've shown our family. I'm trying to learn from your example." It was perhaps the most honest thing she'd ever said to me, and I felt something in my heart soften completely. 3 months later, I received a phone call that would test everything we'd rebuilt. It was Michael calling from the hospital. "Mom, it's Brenda. She's been in a car accident. She's okay, but she's going to be in the hospital for a few days, and someone needs to stay with the twins." "I'll be right there," I said without hesitation. When I arrived at their house, Emma and Jake were sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, trying to act normal despite their worry. "How's Mom?" Emma asked immediately. "She's going to be fine," I assured her. "She has a broken leg and some bruises, but the doctors say she'll recover completely. Your dad is staying with her tonight. Can we see her tomorrow?" Jake asked, looking younger than his 17 years. "Of course. But tonight you're stuck with me. I hope you don't mind having your grandmother as a sleepover companion." Emma smiled through her tears. "Actually, that sounds perfect. Will you make us hot chocolate like you used to make for Dad when he was scared?" I spent that evening taking care of my grandchildren the way I'd always dreamed of doing. I made hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. I helped Jake with his math homework. I braided Emma's hair before bed. I sat with them while they called friends to explain why they might be distracted at school the next day. But most importantly, I was there when Jake had a nightmare about losing his mother and needed someone to remind him that accidents happen but families take care of each other. "Grandma," he whispered as I sat on the edge of his bed, "what if something worse had happened to Mom?" "But it didn't," I said gently. "She's safe, and she's going to come home soon. And Jake, even if something terrible did happen, you and Emma would never be alone. You have your dad, and you have me, and you have each other. Family means no one faces the hard times by themselves." The next morning, as I made breakfast for my grandchildren before school, Emma hugged me from behind while I stood at the stove. "Grandma, I'm so glad you're here. I don't know what we would have done without you." "You would have figured it out," I told her. "You and Jake are strong, capable people. But you're right that it's better when family takes care of family." "Is this what it would have been like?" she asked quietly. "If we'd known you all along?" I turned to face her, this almost adult granddaughter who still needed comfort during scary times. "This is what it's like now," I said. "And that's what matters most." When Brenda came home from the hospital a few days later, she was different. Not just because of the crutches or the way she moved more carefully, but because she'd had time to think about what really mattered. "Margaret," she said as I helped her settle into her recliner, "the kids told me how you took care of everything while I was in the hospital. How you stayed with them, helped with homework, made sure they weren't scared." "That's what grandmothers do," I said simply. "That's what family does." "I know," she replied. "And I want you to know that I'm grateful. Not just for this week but for everything. For being the kind of person my children can depend on." Over the following weeks, as Brenda recovered, our family dynamic shifted into something even more comfortable and natural. I helped with carpools when she couldn't drive. She called me to ask for advice about college applications and teenage problems. Michael stopped looking nervous when his mother and wife were in the same room together. Emma and Jake moved seamlessly between both homes, treating my house as naturally as their own. We'd become what I'd always hoped for but never dared to expect, a real family that supported each other through both celebrations and challenges. The day Emma graduated from high school was one of the proudest moments of my life. She gave the valedictorian speech, and as she stood at the podium talking about resilience, forgiveness, and the power of second chances, I knew she was speaking from her own experience of watching our family heal. "Sometimes the most important lessons come not from our successes," she said to the packed auditorium, "but from watching the adults in our lives admit their mistakes and work to make things better. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones that have been broken and repaired with love." After the ceremony, Emma found me in the crowd and hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, "for never giving up on us. For showing us what real love looks like." As I held my granddaughter, this brilliant young woman who was heading to art school in the fall, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The 13 years of separation hadn't been wasted after all. They'd taught us to value what we had and never take family for granted again. They'd shown Emma and Jake that love perseveres even through the most difficult circumstances. Jake's graduation came 2 years later, and by then, our family rhythm was so natural that no one could remember how strange it had once felt to have me at family gatherings. Jake had chosen to study business, planning to eventually take over the family company that Michael had rebuilt with my help and guidance. "I want to build something that lasts," he told me as we planned his graduation party. "Something that brings families together instead of tearing them apart." He'd learned from watching his parents' mistakes, and he was determined to create a different legacy for his own future family. At Jake's graduation party, held once again in my backyard with family and friends celebrating together, Brenda pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Margaret, I need to tell you something I should have said years ago." "What's that, dear?" "I was wrong about almost everything when I was younger. I thought love was about holding on tightly, about protecting what was mine. I didn't understand that love grows when you share it. I thought you wanted to take my place as the children's most important adult. I didn't realize you just wanted to be part of their lives." It was the fullest, most honest apology I'd ever received, and it healed something in my heart I didn't even know was still wounded. Brenda, I replied. We were all learning as we went. The important thing is that Emma and Jake grew up surrounded by people who love them, even if it took us a while to figure out how to love them together instead of separately. She nodded, tears in her eyes. They're good kids, aren't they? Despite all our mistakes, they turned out to be really good kids. They're extraordinary kids, I agreed. And they're going to be extraordinary adults because they learned how to handle family complications with grace and forgiveness. That's a gift that will serve them their whole lives. As the party wound down and guests began leaving, I stood in my kitchen cleaning dishes and reflecting on how completely my life had changed since that day Brenda first showed up asking for money. The house I'd bought hoping to reunite my family had become exactly what I dreamed, a gathering place where my children and grandchildren felt welcomed and loved. The rooms I'd designed for Emma and Jake had been filled with laughter, homework sessions, art projects, and countless conversations about their hopes and dreams. The dining room had hosted birthday dinners, holiday celebrations, and ordinary Tuesday night meals that had become precious family memories. Emma came up beside me as I finished the last of the wine glasses. Grandma, can I ask you something? Always, sweetheart. Do you ever regret selling your catering business and using the money to buy this house? I considered her question carefully. The business had been my life's work, built from nothing into something valuable and respected. But trading it for this family reunion had been the best decision I'd ever made. Never, I said honestly. That business gave me independence and security, but this house gave me something much more valuable. It gave me you and Jake and the chance to be the grandmother I always wanted to be. What will you do when Jake and I go to college? She asked, a hint of worry in her voice. Will you be lonely in this big house by yourself? I smiled, thinking about all the plans I'd been making. Actually, I've been thinking about starting a new business. Cooking classes for families. Teaching grandparents and grandchildren to make recipes together. Helping other families create the kind of memories we've been making in this kitchen. Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. That's perfect. You could help other families learn what we learned about cooking and talking and sharing stories. You could help other grandparents connect with their grandchildren. Exactly, I replied. And maybe some of those families will be dealing with complicated relationships like ours was. Maybe I can help them figure out how to heal old wounds and build new traditions. As Emma headed up to her room to pack for her last summer before college, I realized that this next chapter of my life felt just as exciting as buying the house had 3 years ago. I'd proven that love could overcome lies and manipulation. Now I wanted to help other families discover the same truth. The kitchen that had become the heart of our family's healing could become a place where other families learned to repair their own broken relationships. 6 months later, Grandma Margaret's kitchen officially opened for business. My first cooking class was attended by 5 grandmother-grandchild pairs, including one family that had been estranged for years due to a daughter-in-law who sounded remarkably like Brenda used to be. As I watched a 70-year-old woman teach her 8-year-old grandson to roll pasta while they laughed about his crooked attempts, I felt the same satisfaction I'd experienced that first night Emma and Jake stayed for dinner. This was what I was meant to do. Bring families together around food and love and the understanding that relationships could be repaired with patience and kindness. The local newspaper wrote a feature story about my classes, focusing on how I'd built a business around healing family relationships. Food has a way of opening hearts, I told the reporter. When people cook together, they talk. When they talk, they learn about each other. And when they learn about each other, they usually discover that love is stronger than whatever drove them apart. The article brought more families to my classes, including several dealing with grandparent alienation similar to what I'd experienced. Teaching them felt like turning my painful experience into something useful and healing for others. Emma called me one evening during her first semester of art school, excited to share news about a project she was working on. Grandma, I'm creating a series of paintings about family healing. My professor says it's some of the most emotionally powerful work she's seen from a freshman student. That's wonderful, sweetheart. What inspired the series? Our story, she said simply. The way our family came back together. I want to show other people that broken families can become beautiful again if everyone is willing to do the work. I felt tears in my eyes, proud of this granddaughter who was using her artistic gifts to spread hope and healing. One of the paintings is of you in your kitchen the first night we had dinner all together, she continued. You're stirring something at the stove, and there's golden light coming through the windows, and everyone looks peaceful and happy. I called it coming home. That sounds perfect, I replied. Because that's exactly what it felt like when we all found our way back to each other. As we talked about her classes, her new friends, her plans for the future, I marveled at how naturally our relationship had developed once the barriers were removed. Distance didn't diminish our connection because it was built on genuine love and mutual respect. Jake visited me the following weekend, bringing a friend from college who was interested in business entrepreneurship. As I showed them around my kitchen classroom and explained how I developed the business model, Jake beamed with pride. My grandmother built $1 million catering business from scratch, he told his friend. Then she sold it to buy a house big enough for family reunions. Now she's building another business that helps families heal. She's basically my hero. His words filled my heart with warmth, but more than that, I could see how our family's story had shaped his understanding of what really mattered in life. Success wasn't just about money or achievement. It was about creating connections that enriched everyone involved. That evening, as Jake and his friend helped me prepare dinner, I thought about the conversation I'd had with Brenda earlier that week. She'd called to tell me about a conflict she was having with her own mother and to ask for advice about how to handle it. I keep thinking about what you said about love growing when you share it, she told me. I want to apply that to my relationship with my mom, but I don't know where to start. The fact that she'd asked for my guidance showed how completely our relationship had transformed. We'd gone from enemies to allies, working together to create the healthiest possible environment for Emma and Jake. Start small, I'd advised her. Invite her for coffee. Ask about her life. Share something real about yours. Don't try to fix everything at once, but be open to the possibility that your relationship could become something different than it's been. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was helping my former adversary repair her own family relationships, but it felt right. We'd all learned that holding grudges only hurt the people we loved most. Brenda had become a genuinely good mother and a supportive daughter-in-law, and she deserved to have healthy relationships with all the important people in her life. A year later, I received an invitation that brought tears of joy to my eyes. Jake was getting married to a wonderful young woman named Sarah, and the wedding invitation included a special note. Grandma Margaret, we can't imagine celebrating this day without you. Will you do us the honor of officiating our ceremony? You taught us that family is about choosing to love each other every day, and we want you to help us make that promise official. I'd been ordained online years earlier as part of a joke gift from Emma, but now it seemed like perfect preparation for this moment. Standing before Jake and Sarah on their wedding day, looking out at a crowd that included both sides of our beautifully complicated family, I felt the deepest satisfaction of my life. Marriage, I told them, isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about choosing someone you want to grow with, someone whose flaws you can accept while they accept yours. It's about building something together that's stronger than what either of you could create alone. As I pronounced them husband and wife, I thought about all the relationships that had been healed and strengthened to bring us to this moment. Emma stood as Sarah's maid of honor, having become close friends with her future sister-in-law. Michael walked his son down the aisle with tears of pride in his eyes. Even Brenda's mother was there, their relationship repaired using some of the same principles that had healed our family. At the reception, held in my backyard under twinkling lights strung between the trees Jake had helped me plant, I watched 3 generations of our family dancing and laughing together. Emma was home from art school, glowing with confidence and creative energy. Michael and Brenda moved together on the dance floor like a couple who'd learned to truly partnership after years of practicing. Jake and Sarah gazed at each other with the kind of love that made everyone around them believe in happy endings. And scattered throughout the crowd were families I'd met through my cooking classes, people who'd become friends after learning to heal their own relationships in my kitchen. "Mrs. Thompson," Sarah approached me as I was watching the celebration from my favorite chair on the porch, "I want to thank you for something." "What's that, dear?" "For showing Jake what unconditional love looks like. He told me about the years when you couldn't see him and Emma, but how you never stopped loving them or hoping they'd come back to you. He said watching you forgive and rebuild relationships taught him that love isn't about keeping score. It's about choosing to start fresh every day." Her words reminded me that the most important legacy I could leave wasn't money or property, but the example of how to love people through difficult circumstances. As the evening wound down and guests began saying their goodbyes, Emma found me still sitting on the porch, contentedly watching the cleanup process. "Grandma, this was the perfect wedding. Everything Jake and Sarah dreamed of." "It was beautiful," I agreed. "And more than that, it was real. You could see how much they love each other, and you could see how much their families support them." "Do you think they'll be happy?" she asked, settling into the chair beside me. "I think they'll work at being happy," I replied. "Which is the only way happiness really works long-term." "Grandma," Emma said softly, "I want you to know something. When I graduate from art school next year, I'm planning to move back here. Not to live with you," she added quickly, "but to be close to family. I've been thinking about opening an art therapy practice, maybe working with families who are trying to heal from trauma or estrangement." My heart swelled with pride and gratitude. Emma had found a way to use her gifts to help others while staying connected to the family we'd worked so hard to rebuild. "That sounds perfect, sweetheart. I think you'd be wonderful at helping families heal through creativity. I learned from watching you," she said. "You turned your pain into something that helped other people. I want to do the same thing, just with paint instead of food." As we sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear above our family's gathering place, I reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought us to this moment. 13 years ago, I'd been a lonely widow whose family had been stolen by someone else's fears and insecurities. Tonight, I was surrounded by children and grandchildren who chose to include me in their most important moments. The difference had been made not through force or manipulation, but through patience, love, and the willingness to forgive without forgetting the lessons learned along the way. 6 months later, I received a call that would test everything I thought I understood about forgiveness and family healing. It was from a lawyer, informing me that Brenda's father, who had been estranged from his daughter for over a decade, was dying and wanted to make amends before it was too late. "Mrs. Thompson," the lawyer said, "he's heard about your family's reconciliation through mutual friends, and he's asked if you might be willing to speak with him about how you rebuilt your relationships with your grandchildren. He's hoping you might have advice about approaching his own daughter." It was a strange request, but it felt like another opportunity to turn painful experience into healing for someone else. I agreed to visit Brenda's father in the hospital, not knowing what to expect from this man who'd been absent from his daughter's life longer than I'd been absent from my grandchildren's lives. What I found was a broken man who'd made different mistakes than mine but was facing the same consequences. Isolation from people he loved because pride and stubbornness had seemed more important than swallowing difficult truths. "I don't know how to fix what I broke," he told me, his voice weak but earnest. "I don't even know if Brenda would want to see me after all these years. The only way to find out," I told him gently, "is to try. But you have to be prepared for the possibility that she might not be ready to forgive you. And you have to be willing to accept that rebuilding trust takes time, even when someone wants to give you another chance." We talked for an hour about mistakes and consequences, about the difference between apologies and changed behavior, about the courage it takes to reach out when you're not sure you'll be welcomed back. When I left the hospital, I called Brenda to let her know her father wanted to see her, but I didn't pressure her to make any particular choice. The decision had to be hers. Brenda chose to visit her father, and though their reconciliation was more complicated than ours had been, they managed to find some peace before he passed away a few weeks later. At his funeral, Brenda thanked me for helping facilitate their final conversations. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "After everything I put you through, you could have refused to get involved in my family drama." "Family helps family," I replied simply. "And Brenda, we're family now. Not just because of Emma and Jake, but because we chose to build something good together after tearing each other down. That makes us family in the truest sense." As we stood together at the graveside, supporting each other through another difficult family moment, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected relationships become the strongest ones. We'd started as enemies and become true allies, bonded by shared commitment to the children we both loved and the hard-won wisdom that love really does conquer all when it's given the chance. If Margaret's patient love and strategic kindness moved you, you understand something powerful about the difference between giving up and letting go. Sometimes the most healing response to rejection isn't fighting back immediately. It's building a life so full of authentic love that truth speaks for itself. Margaret's story teaches us that real power isn't about controlling others or proving points. It's about becoming so grounded in your own worth that manipulators lose their ability to hurt you. Her victory wasn't just reclaiming her family. It was showing them what unconditional love actually looks like. Our book, Healing Hearts, A Grandmother's Guide to Family Recovery, explores these deeper truths about rebuilding relationships after betrayal. Click the link in the description because every grandmother deserves to know that love, patience, and genuine kindness will always triumph over fear, control, and manipulation. If Margaret's journey resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to Granny's Voice for more stories of women who chose healing over hatred and built something beautiful from broken pieces. Remember, the best families aren't perfect ones. They're the ones that keep choosing love even when love gets complicated.